This is what life is like in Mongolia, the strangest country where women have many lovers. Mongolia is a country that seems to have emerged from another dimension, a vast desert of endless steppes, majestic mountains and skies so broad you can almost touch them. A place where time appears to move differently and where the most ancient traditions coexist with astonishing modern ways of life. In this corner of the world, known for its history of nomadic warriors and vast, almost uninhabited territories, a little known and for many almost incomprehensible reality emerges. Women have many lovers. This fact, so strange to the Western mindset, is intertwined with a culture, a social code, and an understanding of desire and relationships that challenges norms and expectations. From the very first moment, Mongolia imposes itself with its wild nature. More than 70% of the country is covered by steppe, an endless expanse of grasslands and gentle hills where the wind blows free and the silence is broken only by the sound of galloping horses or the cry of eagles. The nomadic life that has prevailed for centuries remains the heart of this nation. Families move with their yurts, the traditional tents, following their herds of sheep, goats, camels, and horses. This itinerant existence shapes everything, even the ways in which human relationships and love are understood. In Mongolia, female sexual freedom, far from being a taboo, has deep roots in the nomadic social structure. Women, in addition to being the guardians of home and family, possess an autonomy that surprises anyone who observes them without prejudice. Mongolian culture, founded on traditional codes that value strength, adaptability, and practical wisdom, acknowledges that love and desire cannot be confined by rigid rules. In many cases, women maintain multiple romantic relationships without this affecting their honor or social standing. On the contrary, it is seen as part of a rich and fulfilling life, where choice and passion are celebrated and respected. This apparent freedom has a unique cultural context. In rural, nomadic Mongolia, formal marriages exist, but unions can be flexible and often temporary. It is not unusual for women to have several lovers, who may be different men in different seasons or circumstances. This practice is linked to constant mobility, the need for social and economic alliances, and the valuing of emotional experience as a central element of life. Thus, love is not a rigid, exclusive commitment, but a complex network of bonds and affections woven and unwoven with the same naturalness as the threads of a tapestry. But this dynamic also manifests in the cities, albeit in more discrete forms adapted to urban pace. In Ulaanbaatar, the capital, young women combine modernity and tradition, building their identities amid the pressures of a still conservative society and the freedoms offered by cultural change. Social life is marked by a mix of Asian and Western influences, and the idea of having multiple lovers, even if not always publicly admitted, is tolerated and even practiced by many. This phenomenon defies the traditional mold of the monogamous couple and reveals a social fabric where desire and female autonomy have a much broader space than one might imagine. Nomadic Mongolian women are true masters of balance. They must care for their families, tend to their animals, prepare food, and protect the yurt, all while maintaining a network of relationships that sustain them emotionally and socially. Female polygamy, although not in formal legal or religious terms, but in everyday practice, allows them to forge alliances that strengthen the community and offer a variety of support. Through these ties, they gain security, companionship, and in many cases, the ability to choose with whom to share different aspects of their lives. Sexuality thus becomes a complex and dynamic dimension, laden with meaning beyond the simple physical act. Yet this reality is not without contradictions and tensions. Mongolia is a country navigating between tradition and modernity, and many young women experience the clash of expectations. On one hand, there is the ancestral culture that values sexual freedom and autonomy. On the other, the growing influence of conservative, religious, and globalized norms that promote monogamy and fidelity as essential values. This tension creates a scenario in which women must constantly negotiate their personal space, their identity, and their way of experiencing love. Desire in Mongolia is deeply bound to nature. Nights beneath a star-studded sky in the middle of the steppe, days spent working alongside animals, ancestral dances and rituals. All this shapes a sensory landscape that makes love and sensuality integral experiences. Women, with their strong and confident gaze, their delicate gestures, and their natural beauty, embody that connection between the wild and the human. Their bodies and spirits are part of a continuous ritual of seduction and choice, where each lover represents a possible world, a distinct story. Marriage in Mongolian tradition does not always imply exclusivity nor lifelong commitment. Weddings can be communal celebrations of union, but they also recognize the complexity of human relationships. Male polygamy has been historically common, but the female reality, with multiple lovers or partners, adds an extra layer of freedom that breaks with usual schemes. This openness is not based on chance, but on a value system that prioritizes honesty, responsibility, and mutual respect within a social network that ensures care and protection for all members. Mongolian legends and myths also reflect this plural view of love. In ancestral tales, women often appear as strong, independent figures, capable of choosing and loving without restrictions. They are portrayed as keepers of secrets, enchantresses of desire, and queens of a sensuality that defies limits. These stories not only feed the popular imagination, but also legitimize a reality in which passion and freedom are inseparable. In this context, female sexuality is not a taboo, but a central element of existence. Courtship rituals, for example, are full of symbolism and gestures that celebrate attraction and desire. Women can display their interest in both direct and subtle ways, and men learn to read these signals to forge connections that may last from one night to a lifetime. This game of seduction is an essential part of Mongolian culture, a dance combining respect, mystery, and provocation. Modern Mongolian history has also influenced these dynamics. After decades of Soviet influence and radical political changes, the country has experienced a cultural opening that has empowered individual expression and the re-evaluation of social norms. Mongolian youth, especially, are questioning and transforming traditional ways of relating, incorporating new ideas of freedom, equality, and desire. However, this transformation always occurs from a foundation of respect for roots and customs, resulting in a rich and diverse cultural mosaic. We can say that life in Mongolia is a fascinating journey through a culture where female desire is not only accepted but celebrated. Women, free and determined, navigate between lovers and responsibilities with a naturalness that both perplexes and fascinates. This land of infinite steps and open skies thus offers a provocative and sensual perspective on love, challenging prejudices and opening the door to a world where freedom and pleasure walk hand in hand. In Mongolia, love is not a prison, but a space of multiple possibilities. In the heart of Asia, Mongolia extends its vast territory like a canvas where every detail reveals a story of freedom, mystery, and customs that seem to defy time. In this landscape, where the wind plays with the mountains and the steppe fades into the horizon, Mongolian women have become living symbols of a delicate balance between tradition and autonomy. Their way of experiencing love and desire is a fascinating blend of independence and responsibility, passion and community, an existence that provokes and confounds those who seek to understand it from the outside. The relationship between men and women in Mongolia cannot be understood without knowing the natural and social environment in which it develops. Extreme climatic conditions with harsh winters and short summers have shaped a culture where survival depends on collaboration and flexibility. In this context, women do not only fulfill a domestic role but are fundamental pillars of the social structure. Their ability to manage multiple effective relationships, often simultaneously, is not simply a matter of desire, but a strategy to strengthen social and economic networks that support the entire community. Unlike many societies where monogamy is the absolute norm and sexual exclusivity is tied to strict moral concepts, in Mongolia, love relationships are more fluid and adapt to the needs and realities of nomadic life. Here, women can have multiple lovers, and this practice is not burdened by guilt or social stigma. On the contrary, it is part of a coexistence system that values honesty and mutual respect among all parties involved. It is not a secret or clandestine game, but a tacit agreement recognizing the complexity of the human heart. In the steppe, where distances are great and families live dispersed, having multiple effective ties is a way of ensuring protection, resources, and companionship. Women act as the nucleus connecting different men and families, creating a network that strengthens social cohesion. These bonds are based not only on passion or desire, but also on a commitment to collective well-being. Each relationship provides different support. One may supply economic help, another may be a partner for travel or work, and another may be a confidant and friend. This multiplicity is seen as a richness, not as a threat. Moreover, Mongolian sexuality is intrinsically linked to ancestral rituals that celebrate fertility, connection with the land, and vital energy. Traditional ceremonies, such as weddings and summer festivals, are full of symbols that evoke the power of love and sex as creative forces. Women participate actively in these rituals, not only as passive figures, but as protagonists invoking blessings and protective energies. This spirituality tied to desire reinforces the idea that sexual freedom is an essential part of life and the continuity of the community. Lovers in Mongolia not only share moments of intimacy, but also fulfill social and spiritual roles within the community. For example, the bond between a woman and her lovers may be marked by codes of loyalty and mutual support that transcend the physical. Often, these men are part of the network that helps maintain the household economy or care for children, even if they are not legally married to the woman. This flexibility allows women to manage their affective and sexual lives with autonomy without renouncing the stability and protection their families need. In the cities, this pattern adapts to a different pace but remains present. Contemporary Mongolia, especially in Ulaanbaatar, is a vibrant mix of tradition and modernity, where youth explore new ways of experiencing love and desire. Despite the growing influence of globalized values, the idea of maintaining multiple effective relationships, although not always openly acknowledged, is part of the social fabric. Urban women often negotiate their independence with family and societal expectations, constructing a reality where choice and sexual freedom gently find their way. This phenomenon is not limited to private spheres, but also manifests in popular culture and art. Traditional Mongolian music, with its deep, melodic chants, often celebrates passion and female sensuality as essential elements of life. Dances, costumes, and ceremonies reflect the connection between body, nature, and desire. At festivals, expressions of flirtation and seduction, far from being repressed, are valued as manifestations of strength and vitality. But this freedom also has its rules and limits. Although women can have multiple lovers, honesty and respect are fundamental for these relationships to function. Betrayal or deceit can break the fragile network that sustains the community and endanger family stability. Therefore, negotiations among those involved are usually clear and direct, avoiding misunderstandings and conflicts. This system, which might seem chaotic or disorderly from the outside, is actually regulated by social codes that ensure balance and well-being for all. Another fascinating feature of love life in Mongolia is the central role played by courtship and seduction rituals. These rituals, inherited from ancestral generations, are complex and laden with symbolism. The gestures, the glances, and the actions have profound meaning, and they are carefully interpreted by those who participate in them. The Mongolian woman, with her natural elegance and inner strength, uses these codes to express her desires and choose her lovers. It is not an act of frivolity, but rather a manifestation of power and wisdom. Festivities such as Naadam, one of the most important celebrations in Mongolia, are moments when these courtship dynamics intensify. During these festivals, which combine traditional sports, music, and spiritual ceremonies, attraction and desire are openly displayed. The women, dressed in colorful and elaborate costumes, become the center of attention, and the men compete not only in physical strength but also in the skills of winning their favor. This atmosphere, full of energy and sensuality, reinforces the idea that love and desire are essential forces that give meaning to life. But not everything in this story is light and celebration. Female sexual freedom in Mongolia also faces challenges and contradictions. The influence of lamaism, although largely compatible with traditional practices, introduces more conservative values that sometimes clash with the open forms of loving. Moreover, modernization and globalization bring with them new ideas and pressures that often generate tensions in how women live their sexuality. In some sectors, monogamy and fidelity become ideals difficult to achieve, while in others, the acceptance of affective plurality is maintained. The economy also plays an important role in this equation. Nomadic life is increasingly difficult to sustain, and many families move to cities in search of opportunities. This migration causes changes in social structures and personal relationships. Urban women may face greater pressure to conform to conventional partnership models, while in the countryside, tradition remains stronger. This contrast creates a complex social landscape where women must navigate between multiple identities and expectations. However, despite these challenges, the essence of female freedom in Mongolia persists. The history of this country is also the story of women who have known how to maintain their autonomy, their desire, and their power, adapting to circumstances without losing their identity. Their ability to love freely, to build diverse emotional networks, and to live their sexuality with pride is one of the most surprising and admirable features of Mongolian culture. Ultimately, Mongolia offers a different vision of love and desire, a mirror in which a reality is reflected where passion is not chained but flows freely and powerfully. The women, with their untamed beauty and free spirit, are the protagonists of this fascinating story, which challenges prejudices and opens the door to new ways of understanding what it means to love. On the infinite steppes and beneath the open skies, life is lived intensely, and love, in its many faces, is the force that sustains everything. The complexity of social life in Mongolia is deeply intertwined with its millennia-old traditions and with the changing rhythm of the present. In this third chapter, we will explore in detail how family structures and emotional relationships develop in a country where the vastness of the territory seems to match the breadth of human emotions. We will discuss polygamy, multiple marriages, and how women play a central and surprisingly free role in these scenarios, challenging Western notions of what fidelity and commitment mean. The traditional Mongolian system has historically been flexible and practical regarding romantic relationships. Polygamy, although not universal, has been a common practice among certain sectors, especially among leaders and wealthy herders. However, what draws attention is not only the possibility of a man having several wives, but the fact that women can also maintain parallel relationships outside of marriage without this being considered a serious social transgression. In Mongolian culture, the idea of an exclusive couple is not always the rigid rule, but rather one of the multiple forms that love can take. This system is based on a dynamic of trust, respect, and implicit agreements that allow each person to navigate their relationships with a degree of freedom. For example, a woman may have a formal husband, but also maintain loving bonds with other men who fulfill different roles in her life. It is not uncommon for these relationships to overlap and for there to be a clear understanding among the parties involved. This multiplicity of bonds does not mean unrestrained promiscuity, but a carefully constructed social balance that avoids conflicts and maintains community harmony. In traditional families, the concept of marriage goes beyond romantic union. It is a social pact that includes economic cooperation, mutual care, and the perpetuation of lineage. Women from an early age are instructed to handle these relationships with skill and diplomacy, learning to balance their affections and responsibilities. Marriage is not the end of personal freedom, but rather a platform from which multiple forms of social and emotional interaction unfold. One aspect that deserves special attention is the way Mongolian women use their sexuality as a tool of power and negotiation. In a society where work is arduous and survival depends on cooperation, the ability to attract and keep several men around them means securing resources and protection. These women are masters of the art of seduction, using not only their physical beauty, but also their intelligence, charisma, and deep knowledge of social rules to create solid support networks. On the other hand, nomadic life adds a particular nuance to these relationships. The constant movement of families following seasonal cycles to find pasture for the livestock requires exceptional flexibility and adaptability. In this context, relationships must be strong yet fluid at the same time, capable of withstanding distance and prolonged absence. Communication, although limited by geography, is kept alive through sporadic visits, messages transmitted by intermediaries, and the trust placed in the other person. This mobility also impacts the way families are formed and children are raised. It is common for at certain seasons children to live temporarily with grandparents or relatives while the parents are away, thus maintaining an extended care network. Cooperation among families and lovers is fundamental to ensuring that children grow up in a protected and loving environment, even if emotional bonds do not follow the conventional model. Furthermore, spirituality and ancestral beliefs profoundly influence the way these relationships are lived. Shamanism and Lamaism, predominant in Mongolia, teach the importance of balance between masculine and feminine energies and the connection of the human being with nature and the cosmos. Within this framework, love and sexuality are considered vital forces that nourish the body and soul. Fertility rituals, ceremonies to bless a new love or a new life, and practices honoring ancestors are part of a system that gives meaning and protection to human relationships. A particularly emblematic ritual is Nardam, where traditional sports competitions such as wrestling, horse racing, and archery are celebrated, but which is also an opportunity for romantic and social encounters. During this festival, the energy of the community concentrates on joy, camaraderie, and seduction. Women display their beauty and talents, while men compete not only in strength, but also in elegance and grace to attract their attention. This event reflects how emotional and social life intertwine in Mongolia, without rigidities or taboos. However, not everything is ideal in this system. Women also face pressures and challenges that are not always seen from the outside. Although female autonomy is valued, there are clear expectations regarding household management, child education, and family representation in the community. Maintaining multiple relationships requires a delicate balance that can be exhausting and emotionally demanding. The ability to negotiate spaces and times, as well as to manage jealousy and rivalries, is indispensable to preserving peace and stability. In contemporary Mongolia, the influence of modernity and state laws have begun to modify these practices. Monogamy is officially promoted, and the legal system protects certain family rights that seek to align with international standards. However, in many rural areas, ancestral customs remain in force, and women continue to manage their relationships with traditional flexibility. This clash between the ancient and the new generates constant tensions and negotiations, reflecting the complexity of a country in transition. The marriage market, although less explicit than in other cultures, also exists in Mongolia. Dowries and family negotiations are part of the agreements that finalize marriages, and in some communities, alliances between families through marriage become strategies to consolidate power and resources. Far from being passive objects, women actively participate in these negotiations, using their knowledge and insight to achieve the best possible agreements and to secure a stable position within the community. Another interesting practice is flexible polygyny, where a man can have several wives, but they maintain a horizontal relationship where communication and mutual respect are key. The wives do not compete destructively, but rather collaborate for family and community well-being. This form of coexistence, although unknown to many Western cultures, functions as a complex system that maintains social and emotional equilibrium. Regarding sexuality, it is important to highlight that in Mongolia, there is an open and naturalized view of the body and pleasure. Sexual education is based on respect and knowledge, and taboos are much less rigid than in other societies. The Mongolian woman appropriates her body as a sacred space, and her decisions about love and desire are made with full awareness. This approach has allowed female sexuality to become a liberating force rather than a burden or a source of guilt. Finally, music, poetry, and art reflect this affective richness. The traditional chants, known as hun, express deep emotions and often speak of impossible loves, furtive encounters, and the ephemeral beauty of life. Contemporary Mongolian literature has also begun to explore these themes from modern perspectives, combining respect for tradition with questioning gender roles and individual freedom. In conclusion, Mongolian women inhabit a world where love is not chained to rigid rules, but is a complex network of relationships, agreements, and emotions that form the fabric of the community. Their ability to manage multiple lovers with respect, intelligence, and sensuality is a manifestation of a unique culture that values freedom and social cohesion at the same time. In Mongolia, love is a vast and mysterious territory where every bond matters and every story adds to the richness of the strangest and most fascinating country in Asia.